Cleaner voter rolls mean cleaner elections, and the inverse of that is dirty voting rolls can mean dirty elections. As you may know or should know, that Judicial Watch is America's leading group in trying to ensure that elections are run with integrity, that cheating is minimized, and where the rules are followed. And one of the key ways we do that is to sue in federal court states and localities that refuse to follow federal law that require them to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. And we've had remarkable success in either winning outright or getting agreements through settlements or other actions by the states to clean up the rolls. And in California, I just told you a few weeks ago how they reported to us as under a federal lawsuit settlement to clean up their rolls, that LA County cleaned up 1.2 million names from their rolls, just in LA County alone, thanks to the terms of a Judicial Watch settlement. In North Carolina, about 430,000 names were cleaned up after we sued. In New York, about 450, I think it's even more than that, have been cleaned up because of a Judicial Watch lawsuit or our efforts to alert them that the rolls in New York City were filthy. And so just in those 3 jurisdictions, there's 2 million names we've cleaned up over the last year, thanks to our litigation and pressure. And we also have pending lawsuits in Pennsylvania and Colorado. And we just announced this week, and it was filed with the court, a settlement with Colorado in which they've agreed to report to us over 6 years what they're doing to clean up the rolls. And it's no coincidence, after we filed our lawsuit, and we note in the release describing it, that Colorado, over a key period, increased by 78% the number of voters they removed from the rolls. It was, at least according to numbers I'm seeing here, it went from 172 and changed to about 306,000 names they removed. I think that's what, over 130,000 name difference. So that's an extra 130,000 names they removed after Judicial Watch's lawsuit was filed. We filed the lawsuit way back in October 2020 out in Colorado on behalf of Judicial Watch and 3 residents of Colorado, alleging that the state had failed to clean its voting rolls as required by the National Voter Registration Act. So that's the law you have to remember when you're thinking about what your state is doing or what your locality is doing. What are they doing under the National Voter Registration Act to clean up voter rolls? The lawsuit alleged that high registration rates and other voter roll metrics indicate an ongoing systemic problem with Colorado's voter list maintenance efforts. Judicial Watch sought a court order declaring that Colorado and its Secretary of State violated the law and ordering them to develop and implement a general program that makes a reasonable effort to remove the registrations of ineligible registrants from the voter rolls in Colorado. And again, I would encourage you to kind of listen to that again or go and look at it. We'll have a link below. That's what every state should be doing. They're all supposed to be doing that. And what Judicial Watch does is we look at the numbers, and if their numbers aren't seemingly indicating that they are doing this, we go and warn them. And if they still aren't cleaning up the rolls or show us what they're doing, we sue them. The number of outdated registrations removed by Colorado under this key provision increased after we filed suit, as I said, from about 172,000 to 306,000 registrations for the period ending in 2022. The settlement agreement requires Colorado to provide Judicial Watch its most recent voter roll data for each Colorado county each year for 6 years. The data is to include the total number of registered and eligible voters, active voters, and inactive voters. And inactive voters is a bureaucratic way of saying the voter hasn't voted in a while and they're, quote, inactive, and supposedly they're subject potentially to removal. But they're still registered, practically speaking. So anyone can vote is an inactive, just because you're inactive doesn't mean you can't vote. And in terms of the voter fraud potential, it's kind of a pool of names that fraudsters potentially can use to vote in someone else's name. For instance, if someone has moved away, hasn't been around for years, and they're still on the registration list, why would we want that to be? Obviously, it's an opportunity for fraud. The total number of, and this is additional information, of address confirmation notices sent to Colorado voters pursuant to the National Voter Registration Act. The number of received back confirming or changing an address, and the number that were undeliverable or not returned. And then the number of registration addresses removed pursuant to key provisions of the Act. So what we're demanding and asking is this process be certified more or less under this settlement agreement, and they've agreed to it. And this process is the process that results in these names being cleaned up. And so what happens is, the way I understand it's supposed to work in practice, is that if you don't vote in a federal election, you're supposed to get a notice, a card from your registrar saying, hey, you haven't voted, are you still there? Can you confirm you're at this address? And if you don't respond or otherwise don't vote in the next 2 federal elections, so that we're talking maybe as long as 5 years, they're supposed to remove your name. So we had indications that wasn't going on in Colorado. Maybe they were sending some of the stuff out, but they weren't receiving or removing names when they should have. You know, there are all sorts of arguments we were having back and forth with Colorado. And in the end, we settled that. They said that we're going to be able to track the numbers in a more direct way. And of course, once we sued, they took a bunch of names off, which was really the ultimate purpose of our lawsuit, don't you think? Is just to make sure they're cleaning up the rolls. And then they have a process in place that we're going to be confirming through the settlement that they will clean up as things proceed, which is a typical part of a settlement agreement in a situation like this. Now, by the way, the Colorado Secretary of State is an ardent leftist who hates Judicial Watch. She said our effort here was, fighting democracy was anti-democratic. I mean, how is it cleaning up voter rolls anti-democratic? She's using these left-wing talking points. They don't even make any sense in the context. And if we were going to war against democracy, why is she settling this federal lawsuit with us? It's because there's something I think we fairly were bringing to the table, and they wanted to settle with us. Now, we didn't, it's a settlement, right? So both sides give something up when you settle. So we're satisfied with the settlement. She, rather than just saying she's satisfied with the settlement, decides to attack Judicial Watch, which I think tells you that we were probably right to begin asking questions in the first place, don't you think? So coming on the heels of a massive voter roll cleanup in Colorado, thanks to our lawsuit, this settlement agreement is a major victory for all Colorado voters, and I would submit all voters across the country, because when the voter lists are clean in any particular state, or cleaner than they otherwise would be, that means that the elections there are more honest. And at the federal level, elections have consequences, obviously, by state, obviously at the presidential level, most obviously, but at the congressional level and the Senate level, you want the federal election rolls to be as clean as possible. Simply put, cleaner voter rolls mean cleaner elections. And the inverse of that is dirty voting rolls can mean dirty elections. And that's what we oppose. So Judicial Watch is the national leader in voting integrity and voting rights. As part of its work, we've assembled a team, a crack team, of highly experienced voting rights attorneys who stop discriminatory elections in Hawaii and clean up voter rolls in California, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and other achievements. And that Hawaii case, that's something, I have to go back over that one day with you. I don't have time to do it tonight, but that case is where the leftists in Hawaii wanted to have a race-based election process, and didn't want people of a certain race to vote in elections, to try to push an effort to have Hawaii secede from the United States. Of course, that was endorsed by the Obama administration, but we won. The Supreme Court stopped that election. As I said earlier, in February, Los Angeles County confirmed removal of 1.2 million ineligible voters from its rolls. Since last year, under the settlement under the terms of a settlement agreement they agreed to back in 2017. So I said it's a process, right? They said we're going to follow these rules, and this is what it led to: 1.2 million names being removed from the rolls, just simply by doing this basic list maintenance. And it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but at least you're ensuring there's a process in place that we're going to try to make them cleaner. We settled a case in New York City, as I said, 441,000 names removed after we had sued and warned them. And of course, they promised also to take reasonable steps, like Colorado did, going forward to clean its voter registration rolls. So that, we're not just going to walk away, we're going to monitor what happens and go back if there's an issue. Kentucky, I think the numbers are in the hundreds of thousands as well. We had a consent decree there. So they agreed to clean up the rolls. And Kentucky is a Republican-oriented state. I talked about North Carolina, and that was another big voter roll cleanup where they removed over 430,000 registrations from its voter rolls after we sued. And of course, there's other litigation. In Maryland, we beat back a Democratic legislator attempt to rig elections in favor of Democrats in Congress through improper political gerrymandering. We have an ongoing case in Illinois over their counting ballots that arrive up to 2 weeks, mail-in ballots that arrive up to 2 weeks after the election, including ballots that aren't postmarked. It's at odds with federal law. So this is just great stuff. Our lead lawyer is Bob Popper. He's our lead lawyer on the election issues. He was previously a Justice Department attorney. So not all things that happen in the Justice Department are terrible. Bob worked in the Justice Department. He was at the voting section of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. So, Bob knows what he's talking about. And this is why when Judicial Watch goes to court, we have Russ Noble, who also worked at the Justice Department, and some other great lawyers involved as well. These states have to pay attention to us. So, who would have thought that Los Angeles County in California would have settled with Judicial Watch? Who would have thought that New York City, the very far left jurisdiction, would settle with Judicial Watch? Colorado, the Secretary of State evidently can't stand us, but she still settled with Judicial Watch. And that's frankly to their credit. She's calling us names. I think it's good they settled. That's what a responsible public official does. We're bringing this forward not to destroy people, but just to try to get the law enforced so elections are cleaner. And so good for New York and California and Colorado for settling with Judicial Watch, of course, after we filed the federal lawsuit, to be clear. So it's not completely voluntary. But kudos to them, and obviously kudos to Judicial Watch, because it would never have been done otherwise. By the way, this law can be enforced, this cleanup law, by the federal government, by the Justice Department. It refuses to do that. And so it's up to Judicial Watch, because the Justice Department is run by leftists. They don't want clean voter rolls, ideologically, and they have zero interest in having the Justice Department enforce this area of the law. So it was up to Judicial Watch to come in and sue in federal court on behalf of voters and the American people, and of course you, Judicial Watch supporters, and we're winning. And we're making gains for election integrity and fairer and cleaner elections. It's just great, great news out of Colorado, and more is coming. We're expecting a new set of numbers about voter registration numbers later in the year, and you can bet if the numbers are bad again in any particular state, we will go and figure out what's going on, demand changes, and if the changes aren't made, we will sue again to clean up the rolls. Which is, I don't need to tell you, or maybe I should remind you, it's especially important since we're doing this, what I believe to be reckless, massive mail-in balloting and voting all over the nation. The least we can do is ensure that the voting rolls are clean, so we're not sending ballots to people we know, or should know aren't there. And it's a lot easier and a lot less risky in terms of fraud just to try to vote in someone's name through the mail. So we got to ensure at least the names that are being registered and acted upon are legit in terms of being eligible to vote. So thank God, once again, that Judicial Watch is doing this core work, because it would not be done otherwise, and our elections would be even worse off than you may think they are now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.